What would you do if someone mocked what you loved most? Not the person, the art itself, the thing that gave your life meaning. Marcus sits cross-legged on the worn bamboo floor, watching his hands rest on his knees, feeling his breath move and move. Out the way sensei taught him 3 years ago, the Riverside Aikido Center smells like old wood, and something else, something Marcus can't name, but it feels like safety. Other kids his age spend Friday nights at parties, at movies, at whatever teenagers do when they want to forget they're still becoming themselves. Marcus chooses this: the silence, the discipline, the gentle way of redirecting force. Instead of meeting it head-on, he's not strong like the football players at school, not loud like the debate team captains, not clever like the kids who make everyone laugh in the hallways. But here in this small dojo, with its faded posters of old masters and philosophical sayings, Marcus feels like he belongs to something larger than his awkward 17-year-old frame. The building itself tells stories, if you know how to listen. Built in 1962, originally a dance studio, then a yoga center, then abandoned for 5 years before Sensei Williams found it and saw what it could become. The walls remember every bow, every fall, every moment when a student discovered something true about themselves. Marcus has been coming here since his freshman year, when his mother suggested he needed something to help with his confidence. He'd been getting picked on, then 2 smaller kids, quieter insults, but the pattern was already forming. The first day he walked in, Sensei Williams didn't ask about his previous experience, didn't measure his strength or test his reflexes. Instead, he asked, "Why are you here?" And Marcus had answered honestly, "I want to learn to defend myself." Sensei nodded, but said something unexpected. "We don't teach defense here, we teach harmony. Sometimes they're the same thing, sometimes they're not." That was 3 years ago. Now Marcus understands what Sensei meant. The front door chime announces someone entering, heavy footsteps, voices that carry too much confidence for this sacred space. 3 boys from his high school. Marcus recognizes them immediately. Tyler Morrison leading the pack with his usual smirk and phone already recording. Behind Tyler walks Jake, Chin, star wrestler, who gets invited to every party but never seems to enjoy them. And bringing up the rear, Danny Kowalski, whose father owns half the businesses in their small town and never lets anyone forget it. We heard there's some Steven Seagal wannabe who thinks he's a ninja. Tyler's voice cuts through the peaceful atmosphere like breaking glass. His followers laugh, the kind of laughter that has teeth. Marcus doesn't move, doesn't open his eyes, keeps breathing in out the way Sensei taught him, but his chest tightens because he knows they're talking about him. Tyler steps closer, his phone camera trained on Marcus like a weapon. Look at this guy sitting there, like he's meditating or communing with his inner warrior, or whatever. More laughter, sharper, now hungrier. Marcus has heard this before in the school cafeteria, where Tyler performs his cruelty for an audience of teenagers who don't want to become targets themselves. In the parking lot, where Jake demonstrates wrestling moves on anyone smaller than him. In the spaces between classes, where Danny makes jokes about kids whose parents can't afford the latest everything. The Steven Seagal joke started months ago when someone saw him walking to the dojo after school, carrying his white belt like it meant something. They don't understand that Steven Seagal isn't the point, that Aikido existed long before any Hollywood actor, that this art form teaches harmony, not violence. But try explaining that to boys who think strength means making others feel small. Tyler crouches down, brings his phone closer to Marcus's face, the camera's red light blinking like a predator's eye. "Hey ninja boy, show us some moves, break my wrist, or whatever, like your hero Steven Seagal." The words hang in the air, toxic and waiting. Marcus opens his eyes, meets Tyler's stare, sees the phone recording, sees Jake and Danny eager for a show. "What would you do?" Marcus stands slowly, with the fluid grace that comes from 3 years of learning to move like water. His body remembers every lesson, every fall, every moment when Sensei Williams showed him how to transform force into flow. "I practice Aikido," he says quietly, his voice steady despite everything, not because of Steven Seagal, because it teaches peace. Tyler laughs, the sound sharp as broken glass. "Peace? Dude, you're delusional. Steven Seagal is a joke, and so is this whole fake martial arts thing." He gestures around the dojo, at the carefully maintained space, at the photos of masters who devoted their lives to something beautiful. "This is all just pretend." Tyler continues, his phone still recording, just middle-aged men and weird kids playing dress-up. Jake steps forward, his wrestler's confidence making him bold. "Yeah, seriously, what would you do in a real fight? Against someone who actually knows how to fight?" Danny adds, his voice the entitled edge that comes from never having to earn anything. "My dad says martial arts are for people who can't handle real sports." The 3 of them circling now, like sharks who smell blood. Marcus feels something shift inside him, not anger, not fear, something else, something that Sensei Williams has been teaching him for 3 years without ever saying it directly, the art of remaining centered when everything around you tries to pull you off balance. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from, because what happens next changes everything. The front door chime rings again, softer this time, deliberate. Sensei Williams enters, 63 years old, moving with the quiet authority of someone who has nothing to prove. His eyes take in the scene, the phones, the smirking faces. Marcus, standing alone in the center of his sacred space. Gentleman, Sensei says simply, his voice carrying decades of discipline. Yuri, welcome to observe, if you can do so respectfully. Tyler turns his phone towards Sensei. Another target, another opportunity. Actually, old man, we're here to expose this whole Steven Seagal fantasy camp you're running. Show people what a scam this is. Sensei's expression doesn't change, but Marcus notices the way his feet shift slightly, the way his breathing deepens, preparing what Tyler doesn't know. What none of them know is that Sensei Williams trained for 40 years under masters who learned from masters who learned from the founders themselves. What they don't know is about the small wooden box tucked away in Sensei's office containing something that will change everything. They think they understand, something that connects this small dojo in this small town to a legacy that stretches back decades, something that will make Tyler Morrison and his cruel laughter seem very small indeed. But that revelation waits in the shadows, patient as the art itself. For now, Sensei simply bows. The traditional greeting that Tyler and his friends will soon understand means more than respect. It means you are about to learn what Aikido really is and what it means to mock something you don't understand. The bow means nothing to them. Tyler smirks at the formal gesture, like Sensei Williams just performed some ancient comedy routine. Jake starts filming with his own phone because one camera isn't enough for what they plan to do. Danny pulls out his device, 3 phones, now 3 different angles, documenting what they think will be their masterpiece. Look at this, Tyler announces to his cameras. We've got the Sensei himself, master of the Steven Seagal school of fake fighting. Sensei Williams remains still, his bow complete, his hands at his sides. But Marcus sees something in his teacher's eyes, not anger, not fear, something deeper, recognition, maybe like he's seen this before in other dojos. Other times, other young men who thought cruelty was strength. Please remove your shoes, Sensei says calmly. If you wish to step on the mat. Tyler laughs louder, now his audience growing as he live streams to his followers. Did you hear that, guys? We have to take off our shoes to enter the sacred dojo of make-believe, but he doesn't remove them. Instead, he steps forward, his dirty sneakers leaving marks on the bamboo that Marcus spent an hour cleaning before practice. Jake follows his wrestling shoes, grinding against the wood with deliberate disrespect. Danny hesitates for just a moment, then steps forward too, his expensive basketball shoes completing the violation. Marcus feels something break inside him, not his spirit, but his patience. This floor is sacred, he says quietly, his voice carrying further than he intended. Sacred to who? Tyler spins around, his phone camera catching Marcus's face in its hungry lens. To you and your imaginary ninja friends? To Steven Seagal, wherever he is counting his money from gullible people like you. The words hit Marcus like physical blows, but he stays centered. The way Sensei taught him Aikido isn't about Steven Seagal. Marcus says again, his voice stronger. Now it's about harmony, about redirecting violence instead of creating it. Jake steps closer, his wrestler's instincts sensing weakness. So show us, he says, his phone recording everything. Redirect some violence, prove this stuff works against someone who actually fights. Danny adds, his voice emboldened by the mob. Yeah, my dad's right, this is all fake, just like Steven Seagal's movies, just like his black belt, just like everything about him. The cameras capture it all. Marcus standing alone in the center of the mat, surrounded by boys who've never learned the difference between strength and cruelty. Tyler moves closer, his phone inches from Marcus's face. Come on, ninja boy, show us the ancient art of Steven Seagal. Show us how to be a fake tough guy. Behind them, Sensei Williams watches, his expression unreadable, but Marcus notices his teacher's hands beginning to move, subtle gestures, almost like he's practicing forms in the air, or maybe preparing for something. The wooden floor creaks under the weight of disrespect, under the violation of sacred space. Marcus looks around at the walls that have witnessed thousands of hours of dedicated practice, at the photos of masters who devoted their lives to something beautiful, at the simple altar where a single candle burns next to a small wooden box that Marcus has never seen open. Ed's asked about it once 3 months ago, after a particularly good class, when he felt brave enough to ask Sensei about the mysteries of the dojo. Sensei had smiled and said simply some things wait for the right moment to be revealed. Now Marcus wonders if this is that moment. Tyler's voice cuts through his thoughts louder, now more aggressive. Worry, going to make you famous, Marcus, you and your Steven Seagal fantasy. Everyone's going to see what a joke this is. Jake starts doing mock martial arts moves, exaggerated and clumsy, while Danny films him, both of them laughing. Look at me, Jake says in a fake Asian accent. I am master of the ancient art of movie fighting. Danny adds his own commentary, his voice cruel and sharp. This is what Tyler's friend looks like when he pretends to be tough, when he thinks he's Steven Seagal. The mockery builds, feeding on itself, growing stronger with each laugh, each cruel word, each violation of the space that Marcus loves. Tyler steps even closer, his phone camera capturing every detail of Marcus's face. You know what's funny? Tyler says, his voice dropping to a whisper that carries through the entire dojo. Steven Seagal is a fraud. Everyone knows that his movies are jokes, his martial arts are fake, his tough guy act is just an act, and you're just another kid who fell for it, who bought into the fantasy, who thinks he's special because he learned some dance moves and calls them fighting. The words land like physical blows, but Marcus doesn't flinch. He thinks about his first day here when Sensei Williams asked, "Why are you here?" He thinks about 3 years of falling down and getting back up, of learning that strength isn't about hurting others, but about maintaining your center when everything around you tries to knock you down. Tyler raises his voice again, performing for his cameras, for his online audience, for anyone who will watch this, is what happens when you believe in fake martial arts, when you think Steven Seagal is anything more than a washed-up actor playing pretend. Marcus feels the weight of 3 years of training, the muscle memory of countless hours learning to move like water, but more than that, he feels something else, something Sensei Williams has been teaching him without words, the difference between reacting and responding, between being pushed and choosing to move. Tyler's phone captures everything as he delivers what he thinks will be his final blow. Face it, Marcus, you're just another Steven Seagal wannabe in a world that's figured out the joke. But what Tyler doesn't know, what none of them know, is that across the room Sensei Williams has moved to his small office door. His hand rests on the handle of a drawer that hasn't been opened in 15 years. Inside that drawer waits the wooden box that Marcus has wondered about for months, and inside that box something that will change everything these boys think they know about Steven Seagal, about Aikido, about the man who has been teaching Marcus for 3 years, something that will make their laughter sound very different very soon. But for now, Tyler's mockery continues, his cameras rolling, his audience growing, his cruelty building toward something that will demand an answer. 3 phones keep recording as Tyler's performance reaches its cruel crescendo. He starts mimicking what he thinks Aikido looks like, exaggerated arm movements, theatrical facial expressions, while Jake and Danny provide the soundtrack of mocking laughter. This is Marcus in action, Tyler announces to his cameras. Watch him commune with his inner Steven Seagal. Watch him prepare for imaginary combat. Jake joins the performance, grabbing Tyler's wrist in a clumsy imitation of a martial arts technique. "Oh no," Tyler says in mock panic, "he's got my wrist. I'm helpless against his ancient wisdom, his movie magic, his Steven Seagal powers." They both collapse in fake defeat, rolling around on the sacred mat, their shoes leaving more marks on the bamboo. Marcus polished with his own hands. Danny films it all, zooming in on their faces, then panning to Marcus, who stands perfectly still in the center of the chaos. "This is going viral," Danny says with glee. "Everyone's going to see what these Aikido kids really look like when their fantasy meets reality." But Marcus notices something. They don't in the corner of the dojo, barely visible, an old man sits quietly on a folding chair. Mr. Yamamoto, the building's custodian, who comes early every Friday to empty the trash and check the heating systems, been working this building for 23 years, seen the dance studio fail, watched the yoga center close, witnessed Sensei Williams transform this space into something sacred. Marcus has spoken to him maybe a dozen times in 3 years, simple exchanges about the weather, about homework, about nothing important. But Mr. Yamamoto always nods respectfully when Marcus bows to the photos of the masters, always steps carefully around the edge of the mat during his cleaning. Now he sits perfectly still, watching Tyler and his friends desecrate the space he helps maintain. His weathered hands rest on his knees, his back straight. Despite his 74 years, Marcus catches his eye for just a moment and sees something. There's something that looks like recognition, like Mr. Yamamoto has seen this before too, this particular kind of ignorant cruelty. Tyler notices Marcus looking away, spins around to follow his gaze, sees the old custodian sitting quietly in the corner, Look, Tyler says with fresh excitement we've got. An audience, hey old man, are you here to watch the Steven Seagal show too? Mr. Yamamoto doesn't respond, doesn't move, just continues sitting with perfect posture, perfect stillness. Jake starts walking toward him, his phone camera leading like a weapon. This is perfect, Jake says. We can get the whole place, everyone who enables this fantasy. But before Jake can reach him, Sensei Williams steps forward, his voice carrying the authority of decades. That's enough. The words cut through Tyler's laughter, through Jake's momentum, through Danny's commentary. Sensei Williams doesn't raise his voice, doesn't threaten, doesn't make any aggressive moves, but something in his tone stops all three boys like they've hit a wall. Tyler recovers. First, his phone still recording, his audience still watching. And now the master speaks. Tyler says with renewed venom, are you going to show us some Steven Seagal moves too? Going to break our wrists with your ancient wisdom? Sensei Williams walks to the center of the mat, his bare feet silent on the bamboo. His movements flow like water finding its course, like wind moving through trees, like something natural and unstoppable. You came here, he says quietly, to mock something you don't understand. Tyler laughs, but it sounds different now, less confident, more desperate. We understand perfectly, Steven. Seagal is a joke, and this whole thing is just people playing pretend. Jake adds his voice, but stays back near the edge of the mat. Yeah, we know exactly what this is, fake martial arts for people who can't handle real fighting. Danny keeps filming, but Marcus notices his hands shaking slightly, like some instinct is telling him to be careful. Sensei Williams looks at each of them, his gaze steady, patient, measuring, and he turns toward his small office, toward the drawer that holds the wooden box. What you don't understand, he says, still moving toward his hidden secret, is that Steven Seagal learned Aikido from someone. Tyler's laughter becomes shrill, defensive. So what? So did a million other people. That doesn't make it real. That doesn't make him anything but a fraud. But Sensei Williams has reached his office door, has opened the drawer, has removed the wooden box that Marcus has wondered about for 3 years. The box looks ancient, carved from dark wood with symbols Marcus doesn't recognize, but somehow understands are important, sacred maybe, or at least very old. Tyler's phone captures Sensei Williams returning to the center of the mat, the box held carefully in both hands. What's in the box, old man? Tyler asks, his voice still mocking, but quieter now, less certain. More Steven Seagal memorabilia, some signed photos from his movies. Jake and Danny move closer, their cameras focused on the wooden container that seems to hold everyone's attention. Even Mr. Yamamoto leans forward slightly in his folding chair, his eyes fixed on what's about to unfold. Marcus feels his heart beating faster, not from fear, but from anticipation. For 3 years, he's wondered about that box, about its contents, about why Sensei Williams keeps it locked away. Now, finally, he's about to learn what secret his teacher has been protecting. Sensei Williams sets the box on the mat, his movements reverent, ceremonial. His hands rest on the carved lid, but he doesn't open it, not yet. Instead, he looks up at Tyler and his cameras, at Jake and Danny, at their cruel certainty, their ignorant confidence. You want to know about Steven Seagal? He says quietly, his voice carrying to every corner of the sacred space. You want to mock what you don't understand? Tyler nods eagerly, his phone recording everything. Yes, we do. Show us whatever fake memorabilia you've got in there. But Sensei Williams doesn't open the box, doesn't reveal its contents, not yet. Instead, he says something that makes Tyler's laughter die in his throat. Steven Seagal, Sensei Williams says, his voice soft as prayer, but carrying the weight of absolute truth, was my student. The silence that follows fills the entire dojo, stretches into something thick and heavy and impossible to break. Tyler's phone keeps recording, but his hand trembles. Jake and Danny stand frozen, their own cameras capturing their confusion in the corner. Mr. Yamamoto nods, once like he's been waiting 23 years for this moment, and Marcus finally understands why the wooden box has remained hidden for so long. Some secrets are too powerful to reveal until the moment demands nothing less than the truth. The words hang in the air like smoke from a sacred fire. Steven Seagal was my student. Tyler's phone keeps recording, but his hand wavers, the camera losing focus as his confidence crumbles like sand castles meeting the tide. That's impossible, Tyler says, his voice smaller now, uncertain. Yuri, just some old guy in a small town. Steven Seagal trained in Japan with real masters, not with. He gestures around the dojo at the humble space, the worn mats, the faded posters, the simple altar. Not with this. Sensei Williams remains still, the wooden box resting between his palms, like he's holding something alive, something precious. Jake steps Forward his wrestler's instincts still pushing him toward confrontation. Even if that's true, Jake, says his phone camera, shaking slightly. Even if you taught him, that doesn't change anything. He's still a fraud. His movies are still fake. His martial arts are still pretend. Danny adds his voice, but it lacks the cruel confidence from before. Yeah, my dad, says Steven Seagal, never fought anyone real, never proved himself in actual combat. Sensei Williams looks at each of them, his eyes holding the weight of decades of training, of teaching, of watching students grow and change, and sometimes leave. Some truths, he says quietly, are too heavy for young shoulders. The box remains closed, its carved symbols catching the light from the single candle on the altar. Marcus steps closer, drawn by something he can't name, but feels deeply. For 3 years he's trained here, learned here, grown here, without knowing the true history of his teacher. Sensei Marcus, says his voice barely above a whisper, is it true? Did you really teach Steven Seagal? Sensei Williams turns his attention to his student, his most dedicated pupil, the boy who chose peace over violence, harmony over chaos, even when it made him a target. 1974 to 1981, Sensei, says his voice carrying the precision of absolute memory. 7 years. He was 22 when he first walked through that door. He points to the entrance where Tyler and his friends violated the sacred space with their dirty shoes, their cruel laughter, their ignorant certainty. Steven came here hungry for knowledge, desperate to learn everything I could teach him. Tyler's livestream audience is growing, the comments flooding in as word spreads that something significant is happening, but Tyler himself seems smaller now. His phone lower, his voice less sure. That doesn't make sense, Tyler says weakly. If you really taught Steven Seagal, if you're some kind of master teacher, then why are you here? He gestures around the humble dojo, the small town setting, the unremarkable building. Why aren't you famous? Why aren't you in movies? Why aren't you rich? The questions reveal everything Tyler doesn't understand about the nature of true mastery. Sensei Williams sets the wooden box on the mat, but keeps his hands resting on its lid. Fame was never the point, he says simply. Money was never the goal. Recognition was never what we sought. We trained because the training was its own reward. Jake shakes his head, his camera still recording, but his aggression turning to confusion. But if you taught Steven Seagal real martial arts, then why do people call him a fraud? The question hangs in the sacred space, demanding an answer that might hurt more than help. Sensei Williams looks toward the corner where Mr. Yamamoto sits silently, watching with eyes that have seen too much of human nature. The custodian nods once, like he's giving permission for secrets to be revealed, because Sensei Williams says, his voice heavy with old disappointment, Steven forgot the most important lesson. He forgot that true strength comes from within, not from proving yourself to others. He forgot that Aikido is about harmony, not dominance. He forgot that the greatest victories are the ones no one ever sees. Tyler's phone captures every word, but Tyler himself seems to be shrinking under the weight of unexpected truth. But he's still Steven Seagal, Tyler insists, his voice almost pleading. He's still famous, still successful, still everything you'll never. Beta cruelty returns, but weaker now, like a fire running out of fuel. Sensei Williams looks at Tyler with something that might be compassion. Success, he says quietly, is not measured in fame or fortune. It's measured in the lives you touch, the students you guide, the harmony you create in a world that prefers chaos. Marcus feels something shifting inside him, an understanding that goes beyond words. For 3 years, he's been learning from someone who taught one of the most famous martial artists in the world, but more than that, he's been learning from someone who values the quiet dignity of small moments over the loud acclaim of public recognition. Tyler's livestream is reaching thousands now, people commenting, sharing, arguing about what they're witnessing, but Tyler himself looks lost, like he's realizing that his carefully constructed mockery has encountered something too real, too substantial to easily dismiss. The wooden box sits between them, still unopened, still holding whatever secrets Sensei Williams has protected for so long. Mr. Yamamoto clears his throat gently from his corner chair. The sound draws everyone's attention to the old custodian, who has been silently witnessing this confrontation. Excuse me, Mr. Yamamoto says, his accent thick, but his English clear. I remember. He stands slowly, his 74 years evident in every movement, but his bearing proud and straight. I remember the young man who came here 40 years ago, the one who bowed properly, who showed respect, who learned not just techniques, but character. Tyler's cameras swing toward him, this unexpected witness to history. Mr. Yamamoto looks directly at the 3 boys who came here to destroy something beautiful. That young man He says, his voice carrying the authority of lived experience. He was nothing like the man you think you know. The revelation hangs in the air like a bridge between past and present, between the student Steven Seagal was and the public figure he became. And Marcus realizes that the wooden box hasn't even been opened yet, that whatever secrets it contains are still waiting to transform everything. These bullies think they understand about Steven Seagal, about Aikido, about the difference between learning and truly knowing. Mr. Yamamoto's words settle over the dojo like dust motes in afternoon light. I was much younger. Then he continues, his weathered hands gesturing toward the past that lives in these walls, working maintenance at the community center down the street where Williams Sensei first taught classes. Tyler's phone wavers, the live stream audience growing restless, wanting drama, getting history. Instead, Jake steps closer to the old custodian, his camera focused on this unexpected witness. Yuri, just making this up, Jake says, but his voice lacks the conviction from before. Old people always claim they knew famous people before they were famous. Mr. Yamamoto looks at Jake with eyes that have seen 7 decades of young men who mistake ignorance for strength. I have no reason to lie to you, he says simply. I gain nothing from these memories except the sadness of watching a good student lose his way. Danny lowers his phone for the first time since entering the dojo. What do you mean, lose his way? The question hangs in the air, demanding an answer that might complicate their simple narrative of fraud and failure. Mr. Yamamoto looks toward Sensei Williams, who nods, once giving permission for the story to unfold. Stephen Quinn was different. Then Mr. Yamamoto says, using the Japanese honorific that speaks to familiarity, affection, respect. He came to every class early, stayed late, asked questions that showed he understood Aikido was more than technique. Tyler's audience floods the chat with skepticism, demands for proof, accusations of lies, but Tyler himself seems caught between his public performance and private doubt. Even if that's true, Tyler says, his voice quieter, more uncertain, even if he was a good student once, that doesn't change what he became. A fraud, a fake, a joke. Sensei Williams lifts the wooden box from the mat, holds it against his chest like he's protecting something sacred. What he became, Sensei says, his voice heavy with old disappointment, is what happens when ego overwhelms wisdom, when fame becomes more important than truth, when proving yourself to others matters more than maintaining your center. Marcus feels something breaking inside his chest, not his faith in Aikido, but his understanding of human nature. How does someone go from dedicated student to public mockery? How does someone learn harmony, then choose conflict? The questions echo in his mind as Sensei Williams continues speaking. Stephen learned everything I could teach him, Sensei says, his fingers tracing the carved symbols on the box. He mastered the forms, understood the philosophy, could demonstrate techniques with perfect precision. But somewhere between learning and teaching others, between studying and performing for cameras, he forgot the most important lesson. Tyler's phone captures every word, but Tyler's confidence continues eroding like shoreline meeting waves. What lesson? Marcus asks, his voice barely above a whisper. Sensei Williams looks at his student, his most dedicated pupil, the boy who chose this humble dojo over easier paths. That Aikido is not about what others think of you, it's about who you choose to be when no one is watching. The words land like stones in still water, creating ripples that spread outward, touching everything. Mr. Yamamoto nods from his corner, remembering conversations from 40 years ago. Young Stephen understood this. Once, he says, his voice soft with memory, he would bow to every student, thank every teacher, clean the mats without being asked. He practiced not for applause, but for improvement, not for recognition, but for growth. Jake shakes his head, his wrestler's mind struggling with contradictions. But if he really understood all that, if he was really a good student, then what happened? The question demands an answer that cuts deeper than mockery, reaches further than simple judgment. Sensei Williams sets the wooden box back on the mat, but doesn't open it. Not yet. Hollywood happened, he says simply. Fame happened, money happened, people telling him he was special, people demanding he prove himself in ways that had nothing to do with Aikido. Tyler's livestream audience wants action, wants the box open, wants dramatic revelation, wants entertainment, but Tyler himself seems hypnotized by this unexpected story. So he became what you wanted him to be, Tyler says almost to himself, a tough guy, a fighter, a movie star instead of what he really was. Sensei Williams finishes, a student, a seeker, someone trying to understand the difference between strength and violence. Marcus thinks about his own journey, 3 years of training, 3 years of choosing the harder path. The quieter way how easy it would be to abandon everything he's learned here if someone offered him fame, recognition, the chance to be someone other than who he is. Danny's phone captures his confusion, his growing uncertainty. People call him a fraud. Danny says, his voice smaller than before. His techniques don't work in real fights. His movies are ridiculous. His claims are lies. Sensei Williams looks at the three boys who came here to destroy something beautiful. His techniques work perfectly. Sensei says with quiet authority, when applied with proper intent, with correct timing, with genuine understanding. But Steven stopped using them for harmony, started using them for show, stopped practicing them in private, started performing them for cameras. The difference between a martial artist and a movie star is the difference between being and seeming. Mr. Yamamoto stands slowly from his folding chair, his movements careful but determined. He walks toward the wooden box, his presence adding weight to the moment. May by Williams, Sensei? He asks, his hand extended toward the carved container. Sensei Williams looks at his old friend, this keeper of memories, this witness to history. Together, they have watched students come and go, watched some succeed, watched others fail, watched the world change around this small dojo, this sacred space. Together, they remember the young man who could have been so much more than he became. Sensei Williams nods once and places the box in Mr. Yamamoto's weathered hands. The custodian holds it carefully, like he's holding a piece of broken dreams, a fragment of lost possibility inside this box. He says to Tyler and his cameras, to Jake and Danny, to Marcus, and the watching world is proof of what Steven Seagal could have been if he had remembered who he really was. Mr. Yamamoto holds the box like he's cradling broken promises, shattered dreams, the weight of what might have been. Tyler's phone trembles in his hands, his live stream audience demanding action, wanting the box opened, wanting secrets revealed. But Tyler himself seems frozen, caught between his public performance and private fear that everything he thought he knew is about to crumble open. At Jake says, his voice rough with false bravado, whatever's in there, it doesn't change anything. Steven Seagal is still a joke. This place is still fake, and we're still going to expose it. But even as he speaks, Jake takes a step backward, his wrestler's instincts warning him that he's in deeper waters than he realized. Danny's phone captures everything, but his hands shake like some part of him knows this moment will haunt him. Mr. Yamamoto looks at each boy with eyes that have seen too much cruelty in 74 years of living. You want proof, he says quietly, his accent thick, but his words clear. You want evidence that you are wrong about everything you think you know very well. He places the box on the center of the sacred mat, his movements ceremonial, reverent. But first, you must understand what you are about to see. Tyler's audience explodes with excitement, comments flooding the live stream, thousands of people watching this moment unfold. But in the dojo, time seems to slow down, to crystallize around this single moment. Mr. Yamamoto's weathered fingers trace the carved symbols on the box lid. These markings, he says, were made by my grandfather, a master craftsman in Kyoto. He made this box in 1943 during the war, when everything was difficult, when materials were precious, when hope was rare. Tyler lowers his phone, slightly drawn despite himself into the story. It was sent to me. Mr. Yamamoto continues, when I came to America in 1952, the only thing I brought from home, besides memories, for 22 years, it held letters from my family, photographs of people I would never see again, small treasures from a life left behind. Marcus steps closer, feeling the weight of history in this small room. What's in it now? He asks, his voice respectful, understanding somehow that this moment requires reverence. Mr. Yamamoto looks at Sensei Williams, who nods once, giving permission for the final revelation. In 1974, when young Steven began training here, I gave this box to Williams Sensei to hold something more precious than letters, more valuable than photographs. Jake's camera zooms in on the box, on Mr. Yamamoto's careful hands, on the moment before revelation. What? Danny whispers, his cruelty forgotten, replaced by genuine curiosity. Evidence, Mr. Yamamoto says, of who Steven Seagal really was before the world told him who to become. The lid opens with a soft click, revealing contents wrapped in black silk. Tyler's phone captures everything as Mr. Yamamoto carefully unwraps the first item, a photograph, black and white, showing a young man, barely 22, bowing deeply to an older teacher. The young man's face is earnest, respectful, hungry for knowledge. It's unmistakably Steven Seagal, but nothing like the public figure. They know his eyes hold something pure, something seeking, something that believes in the possibility of transformation here. Mr. Yamamoto says, holding the photo where all can see is your fraud, your fake, your joke. Jake stares at the image, his camera, recording his confusion. That's just one picture. Jake says, weakly people can fake anything, mister. Yamamoto reaches into the box, removes another item wrapped in silk, a handwritten letter on rice paper in careful English and flowing Japanese. Tyler's phone captures every word as Mr. Yamamoto reads aloud, Dear Williams Sensei. The letter begins, dated April 15th, 1978. I want to thank you for teaching me that true strength comes from understanding myself, not from defeating others. Yesterday, someone challenged me to a fight called Aikido useless, called me weak. I could have responded with anger, with violence, with the need to prove myself. Instead, I remembered your teaching. I walked away. I chose peace. This felt like a greater victory than any fight could provide. The letter is signed simply Steven. Tyler's livestream audience goes silent, the comments slowing, then stopping as the weight of authenticity settles over everyone watching. But Tyler himself seems to be shrinking, his phone lowering, his confidence evaporating. That's just one letter, he says, his voice barely audible. Anyone could write that, mister. Yamamoto reaches deeper into the box, his movements deliberate, patient. Here, he says, is your answer to that doubt. He removes a black belt worn and faded with age, the belt that Steven earned after 7 years of dedicated training. But look closely at what else it carries along the length of the black fabric. Small tears, careful repairs, evidence of thousands of hours of practice, and embroidered in gold thread, barely visible unless you know to look for it, the words harmony over victory. Tyler's phone slips in his hands, his live stream capturing his growing shock. But more than that, Mr. Yamamoto continues, removing the final item from the sacred box. Here is the last letter Steven wrote before leaving for California, before Hollywood, before everything changed. This letter, dated January 3rd, 1982, written just days before his departure. Dear Williams Sensei, I leave tomorrow for Los Angeles, where opportunities await. I promise to honor everything you have taught me, to represent Aikido with dignity, to remember that harmony is stronger than violence. I will never forget the lessons learned in your dojo, the respect for others, the humility before the art, the understanding that true warriors create peace, not conflict. I will make you proud forever, your student Steven. The silence that follows fills the entire universe. Tyler's phone keeps recording, but his hands shake violently. Now the livestream audience has grown to tens of thousands, all witnessing this moment. When mockery meets truth, Jake lowers his camera completely. Danny's phone slips from nerveless fingers, and Marcus finally understands the full tragedy of what Steven Seagal became versus what he promised to remain. The wooden box sits empty, now its secrets revealed, its truth undeniable. In the corner, Mr. Yamamoto carefully folds each item, returns them to their silk wrappings, to their sacred container. These things, he says quietly, are not for the world to judge. They are for you to understand the difference between who someone becomes and who they promise to be. Tyler's livestream finally ends, the phone falling from trembling hands. The sound it makes hitting the floor echoes through the dojo, like the breaking of something that can never be repaired. The silence stretches like a held breath until Sensei Williams steps forward, his bare feet whispering across the sacred bamboo. Tyler's phone lies motionless on the floor, its screen cracked from the fall. The livestream mercifully ended, but the damage is already done. Thousands witnessed the revelation, the truth that transforms mockery into tragedy. Jake stands frozen, his camera hanging useless at his side, his wrestler's confidence evaporated like morning mist. Danny clutches his own phone, but no longer records, no longer performs his cruelty, just stares at the evidence of his ignorance. Marcus watches his teacher move with the fluid grace that comes from decades of practice, but also with something else, something that looks like sorrow. Sensei Williams kneels beside the wooden box, his movements reverent, careful. These items, he says quietly, his voice carrying to every corner of the violated space, have been hidden for 15 years, since the day Steven's first movie came out, the day I realized he had forgotten every promise he made. In that final letter, Tyler looks up from his shattered phone, his face pale, his usual smirk replaced by something that might be understanding. But why? Tyler asks, his voice small, broken. Why keep them? Why protect his reputation when he became everything you taught him not to be? The question hangs in the air, demanding an answer that goes deeper than martial arts, reaches into the nature of love and disappointment. Sensei Williams carefully lifts the faded black belt from its silk wrapping because Once someone is your student, they remain your student forever, even when they lose their way, even when they break every promise, even when they become the opposite of everything they learned. A teacher's responsibility doesn't end when the student leaves the dojo. Jake takes a step forward, his camera forgotten, but he made you look bad. Jake says, confusion replacing his earlier aggression, his movies, his claims, his whole fake tough guy act reflects on you, doesn't it? Sensei Williams sets the belt gently on the mat, his fingers tracing the embroidered words, harmony over victory. Stephen's failures are not my failures, he says simply. His broken promises are not my broken promises. His lost way is not my lost why. A teacher teaches truth, a student chooses what to do with that truth. Marcus feels something shifting inside his chest, a deeper understanding of what it means to follow this path. All this time, he's been learning not just techniques, but character, not just forms, but philosophy. And now he sees what happens when someone learns the techniques, but abandons the character. Danny finally speaks, his voice barely above a whisper. So Steven Seagal really did learn real martial arts from you, but then he chose to become a fraud anyway. The word fraud sounds different now coming from Danny's lips, not cruel, but sad, like he's finally beginning to understand the true tragedy. Sensei Williams stands slowly, the black belt still in his hand. Steven learned everything I could teach him about Aikido, but Aikido is more than physical technique, more than fighting ability. It's a way of being in the world, a commitment to harmony over conflict, peace over violence, truth over performance. Danny's phone finally slips from his hands, clatters to the floor beside Tyler S. I don't understand, Danny says, his voice thick with confusion. How does someone learn all that and then choose to become what he became? The question cuts to the heart of human nature, to the mystery of how people can know the right path and still choose the wrong one. Mr. Yamamoto speaks from his corner chair, his voice heavy with decades of watching human choices. Money, he says simply, fame, recognition, the approval of people who valued spectacle over substance. Steven chose to give the world what it wanted to see instead of what it needed to learn. Tyler looks around the humble dojo, at the worn mats, the faded posters, the simple altar, the evidence of decades of quiet dedication. But you stayed here, Tyler says, wonder creeping into his voice. You could have followed him to Hollywood, cashed in on your connection, become famous too. Why didn't you? The question reveals something Tyler never considered before, the possibility that choosing obscurity might require more strength than seeking fame. Sensei Williams walks to the altar, places the black belt beside the burning candle, beside the wooden box that holds Stephen's broken promises. Because this, he says, gesturing to the sacred space, to Marcus, to the years of quiet teaching, to the students who chose the harder path. This is what success looks like when you measure it correctly, not movie contracts or magazine covers or millions of adoring fans who don't understand what they're cheering for, but changed lives, developed character, young people who learn to choose peace over violence, harmony over chaos. Marcus looks at his teacher with new eyes, seeing not just the man who taught Steven Seagal, but the man who chose to keep teaching after Steven Seagal forgot everything he had learned. Jake picks up his phone but doesn't turn on the camera. I recorded everything, he says quietly. The whole thing is on my phone, the box, the letters, the belt, everything. Tyler's head snaps up, sudden panic in his eyes. You can't post that, Tyler says, his voice desperate. It will ruin everything. Everyone will know we were wrong about everything. But Jake looks at his phone, then at Sensei Williams, then at the evidence of truth scattered across the sacred mat. Maybe that's exactly what needs to happen, Jake says. Maybe everyone needs to know the truth about Steven Seagal, about this place, about what we almost destroyed today. Danny nods slowly, his cruelty completely gone, replaced by something that might be wisdom. We came here to mock something we didn't understand, Danny says, his voice steady now, honest. We became the thing we were fighting against, frauds, fakes, people who performed cruelty instead of seeking truth. Sensei Williams looks at each of the three boys who violated his sacred space with such confidence, such ignorance, such certainty. Now, see them transformed by the weight of unexpected truth. The real question, he says quietly, is not what Steven became, but what you choose to become from this moment forward. The wooden box sits open, its secrets revealed, its purpose fulfilled, and in the corner, Mr. Yamamoto nods once, like he's been waiting 74 years to witness this exact moment when cruelty meets truth, and learns to bow. 3 weeks later, the dojo feels different, not damaged, but somehow deeper. Tyler Morrison hasn't posted on social Media since that Friday night, when his phone cracked against the bamboo floor, his followers keep asking what happened to the live stream that ended so abruptly, but Tyler doesn't answer. Instead, he sits in his bedroom staring at the saved video on Jake's phone, watching himself transform from predator to something smaller, more human. Jake uploaded the entire recording to every platform he could find, not as mockery, but as testimony, as evidence of what happens when ignorance meets truth. The response: surprised, everyone. Comments flooded in, not from people laughing at Tyler's humiliation, but from viewers sharing their own stories of judgment, their own moments of being wrong about someone, about something they didn't understand. Danny Kowalski has been different too. His father noticed the change when Danny refused to make jokes about the kid from his chemistry class who stutters. When his father asked what happened to his sense of humor, Danny said simply, "I learned the difference between funny and cruel at school." The three boys walk different paths than before. They don't avoid each other, but they don't seek each other out either, each carrying the weight of transformation in their own way. Marcus continues training at the dojo, but with new understanding. Every bow, every technique, every moment of meditation carries the knowledge that his teacher once guided someone who became famous, then lost. The tragedy of Steven Seagal no longer feels like distant celebrity gossip. It feels like a warning, a reminder that character requires constant cultivation, that promises to yourself are the hardest to keep. Sensei Williams has returned the wooden box to its drawer, but something has changed in his teaching. He speaks more often about the difference between external validation and internal growth, about the temptation to perform your practice instead of living it, about how the world will always offer you easier paths that lead nowhere you actually want to. Goon. This particular Thursday evening, Marcus arrives early as always to help prepare the dojo. He finds Mr. Yamamoto carefully polishing the bamboo floor, erasing the last marks left by dirty sneakers 3 weeks ago. The old custodian looks up as Marcus removes his shoes, bows to the altar, begins his preparations. Mr. Yamamoto pauses in his cleaning, leans on his mop. "You know," he says, his accent thick, but his words carefully chosen. "In 74 years, I have seen many young people make mistakes. The worst ones are those who never learn from them." Marcus looks up from arranging the meditation cushions. "But Tyler and his friends, they learned, didn't they, Mr. Yamamoto?" nods slowly, his weathered face creased with something that might be hope. "They learned that strength and cruelty are different things, that truth and performance are different things, that who you are when cameras are rolling might not be who you are when they stop." Marcus considers this as he lights the altar candle, watching the flame steady itself in the still air. "What about Steven Seagal?" Marcus asks. "Do you think he could still learn?" The question hangs in the air between them, heavy with possibility and doubt. Mr. Yamamoto returns to his polishing, but his movements are thoughtful, deliberate. "Perhaps," he says finally, "but some lessons can only be learned in private, away from cameras and audiences and the pressure to be someone other than who you really are." The front door chime announces Sensei Williams' arrival. He enters with his usual quiet dignity, but Marcus notices something different in his bearing. Lighter somehow, as if revealing the secret he'd carried for 15 years has freed him from its weight. "Good evening, Marcus Cohen," Sensei says, using the Japanese honorific that speaks to affection and respect. "Good evening, Yamamoto-san." The formal greeting contains layers of relationship built over decades of shared purpose. As other students begin arriving for the evening class, Marcus watches his teacher prepare for another session of quiet instruction. No cameras recording, no audience demanding spectacle, just the ancient practice of passing knowledge from one generation to the next with patience and humility. Sarah Chun, Jake's younger sister, enters, shyly bowing carefully at the edge of the mat. She's been coming for 2 weeks now, since Jake told her what really happened that Friday night. Her brother's transformation sparked her curiosity about the place that could change someone so completely. Behind her comes Tommy Rodriguez, Danny's former target, the boy who used to hide in bathroom stalls to avoid the daily humiliation. Now he stands straighter, moves with growing confidence, his voice stronger when he greets the other students. Even Rachel Kim, Tyler's ex-girlfriend, who broke up with him after seeing the video Jake posted, has started attending classes, not because she wants revenge, but because she realized she'd been dating someone she didn't really know, someone who confused cruelty with humor, dominance with strength. The evening class begins with the traditional bow, students standing in neat rows facing the altar where the candle burns steadily. Sensei Williams leads them through basic movements, breathing exercises. Partner practice the same techniques he once taught a young man named Steven Seagal, but these students learn them in an atmosphere of respect rather than ambition, of growth rather than performance, of harmony rather than conquest. As the class progresses, Marcus notices something beautiful. The dojo is fuller than it's been in years. Word has spread not about the famous student who forgot his way, but about the teacher who remembered his purpose, about the place where young people can learn the difference between seeming strong and being strong. During the final meditation, as students sit quietly breathing together in the candlelit space, Marcus thinks about the wooden box resting in its drawer, about the letters and photographs and promises that Steven Seagal made and broke, about the tragedy of someone who learned everything he needed to know but chose to forget it when it mattered most, but also about the hope represented by these new students, these young people choosing the harder path, the path that leads not to fame or fortune, but to something more valuable, the ability to look at yourself in the mirror and recognize the person looking back. As the evening ends, as students bow out and return to their everyday lives, Marcus remains to help clean up. Mr. Yamamoto finishes his work and prepares to leave, but before he goes, he stops beside Marcus. The old custodian places a weathered hand on the young student's shoulder. Remember, he says quietly, what happened here 3 weeks ago was not about Steven Seagal, it was about the choice every person faces every day. Who will you be when the world offers you easier ways to live? The question follows Marcus as he finishes his tasks, as he bows to the altar, as he turns off the lights. But in the darkness, the candle continues burning steady and unwavering like truth itself. 6 months later, the question that began this story returns with new weight. What would you do if someone mocked what you loved most? Marcus sits cross-legged on the same bamboo floor where everything changed, but now the dojo holds 37 students instead of 12. The walls remember that Friday night when cruelty met truth and learned to bow. Tyler Morrison enters quietly, his usual swagger replaced by something that looks like humility. He removes his shoes at the threshold, bows to the altar where the candle burns steadily beside the wooden box, now permanently displayed in a place of honor. It's been 3 months since Tyler first attended a class not to mock, but to understand what he almost destroyed. His transformation hasn't been dramatic or movie perfect. Real change happens slowly like water wearing smooth the rough edges of stone. Jake follows his sister Sarah into the dojo, both of them moving with the fluid grace that comes from dedicated practice. Jake no longer wrestles competitively. When his coach asked why, Jake said simply, I found something better than defeating others. Danny arrives with his father, an unexpected development that surprised everyone. Mr. Kowalski had always mocked martial arts as fake sports for weak people, but watching his son's transformation, seeing Danny choose kindness over cruelty, respect over dominance, the businessman who owns half the town decided to investigate what could change a person so completely. Now father and son train together, learning that strength shared is strength multiplied. The evening class begins with the traditional bow, 37 students facing the altar where Steven Seagal's black belt rests beside his broken promises. But tonight, Sensei Williams has something special planned. Before we begin tonight's practice, he announces, his voice carrying to every corner of the sacred space. I want to share something I received yesterday. He holds up a letter handwritten on expensive paper. It arrived without explanation, no return address, but the handwriting is unmistakable. Sensei Williams opens the letter, his voice steady as he reads, Dear Williams Sensei. The letter begins, I know I have no right to write to you after so many years of silence. I know I broke every promise I made in that final letter from 1982. I became everything you taught me not to become. I chose performance over practice, spectacle over substance, fame over truth. The words fall into complete silence. Every student listening to this unexpected message from the past. I saw the video that was posted online, the one showing the wooden box and the letters and the belt I earned in your dojo. The letter continues, I watched those young men learn in minutes what took me decades to understand, that I had lost my way, that I had forgotten who I promised to be. That success measured correctly has nothing to do with box office receipts or magazine covers. Sensei Williams pauses, letting the words settle into the hearts of his students. Tyler looks down at his hands, remembering the cruelty he performed for cameras, for audiences who applauded his ignorance. The letter continues, I cannot undo the harm I've done to the reputation of Aikido, to your teaching, to the promises I broke, but I can do this enclosed. Please find a check sufficient to purchase the building that houses your dojo, to ensure it remains a place where young people can learn what I forgot, to honor the teacher who never gave up on the possibility that even lost students might find their way home. The letter is signed simply Stephen Sensei Williams, folds the paper, carefully places it beside the wooden box on the altar. The check, he says quietly, will go toward a scholarship fund for students who cannot afford training, because Aikido should never be limited to those who can pay. The silence that follows feels different from the silence 6 months ago, not the heavy weight of shock and shame, but the light presence of possibility, of second chances, of redemption earned through quiet action rather than public performance. Marcus raises his hand, a question burning in his chest. Sensei, will you write back? Sensei Williams considers this, his eyes moving across the faces of his students, young and old, rich and poor, former bullies and former victims, all united by the choice to seek harmony over conflict. Perhaps, he says finally, but if I do, it will be to invite him not to perform his redemption publicly, but to practice it privately, to return to the beginning and learn again who he promised. To Beta evening class proceeds with its usual rhythm, breathing exercises, basic forms. Partner practice the same techniques once taught to Steven Seagal, now passed to a new generation, but these students learn them in an atmosphere of humility rather than ambition, of service rather than self-promotion, of quiet dignity rather than loud performance. As the class ends, as students bow out and return to their lives, Marcus remains to help clean up. Mr. Yamamoto has retired his custodial duties, but still comes to every class. Tonight, he sits in his folding chair watching the young people prepare the dojo for tomorrow. These children, he says to no one in particular, they learn something important. That mockery reveals more about the mocker than the mocked. That strength is not about defeating others, but about defeating the worst impulses in yourself. Marcus extinguishes the altar candle, but its light seems to linger in the darkness. He thinks about the question that started this story: what would you do if someone mocked what you loved most? Now he knows the answer: not anger, not revenge, not the need to prove anything to anyone, but patience, but compassion, but the understanding that people who mock what they don't understand are usually mocking their own fear of not being strong enough to try. The dojo falls quiet, but its purpose continues. Tomorrow, 37 students will return, will bow to the altar where Steven Seagal's belt reminds them that talent without character is tragedy, where his letter reminds them that it's never too late to choose again, where the wooden box holds the evidence that every ending can become a beginning if you have the courage to look honestly at who you've become and the strength to choose who you want to. Beta candle may be extinguished, but its light lives on in every student who chooses harmony over conflict, peace over violence, truth over performance, character over reputation, and in the end, that choice is the only victory that matters. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe.